So, if you live in certain parts of the country, especially places like Houston, Texas, or really anywhere along the Gulf Coast, you probably know what I'm about to describe. It's it's this weird architectural reality. You go to pull down that attic ladder, you're looking for Christmas decorations, and instead of just, dusty insulation, you find the guts of your home. And specifically, that giant 40, maybe 50-gallon steel tank full of boiling hot water sitting right above your living room.
Your kid's bedroom.
Exactly. I mean, if you just stop and think about that for a second, it's kind of insane. Why on earth would you put a mechanical system that is guaranteed to fail? I mean, that's not an opinion, that's just physics, in the single most damaging place in the entire
My
house.
absolute worst spot possible.
Today, we are doing a deep dive into this. We've got some amazing source material from Houston-based plumbing and building experts, and we're going to break down the cold, hard economic reasons builders do this, look at some of the unexpected upsides they claim, and then really get into the massive, high-cost nightmare that every homeowner with one of these needs to be ready for. Our mission here is simple. We want to arm you with the knowledge, the actionable steps you need to manage this architectural time bomb. Because it's not a quirk, it's a huge financial liability sitting right over your head. Okay, so let's get into it.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating here when you dig into the sources is that this decision, it has almost nothing to do with smart home engineering.
Right.
It has everything to do with sales,
Sure.
with profit maximization. The core driver for putting this heavy, leak-prone thing in the worst possible spot comes down to one phrase: maximizing conditioned square footage.
Okay, that sounds like some serious real estate jargon. Conditioned square footage.
Right,
Can you
yeah.
break that down for us? What does that actually mean for the listener?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the simplest terms, conditioned square footage is it's the part of your home that you actually live in, the part that's heated and cooled. Your air-conditioned living area,
The space you pay for.
a space you pay for, exactly.
Right.
And that number, that square footage, is the main thing that determines a home's value and its final sale price. Every single foot counts.
Okay.
And a standard tank water heater, it's not a small object. It takes up a footprint of, say, 8 to 12 square feet. If you put that downstairs in a utility closet, you've just lost 12 square feet of that valuable, sellable conditioned space.
And then that's 12 square feet the builder wants to sell for, I don't know, $500 a square foot or whatever the rate is.
Exactly right. So the builder's calculation is really simple. Move the tank up to the attic. It's generally considered dead space. You can't include it in the conditioned square footage listing.
So it's free real estate to them.
It's free real estate. And they free up those 12 square feet downstairs. Now that can become a bigger pantry, a walk-in closet, or just get absorbed into a bigger, more open living room. That simple trade-off boosts their immediate profit, but it just pushes all the long-term risk onto the homeowner.
So the money part is crystal clear, but why here? Why this region? Why not just stick it in a basement like they do in, the Midwest or the Northeast?
And that's all about the local geology. Areas like Houston, much of the Gulf Coast, they sit on top of this expansive clay soil.
Right.
When that clay gets wet, it's swelled up a lot. And when it dries out, it shrinks. And that constant shifting makes building basements. Well, it's incredibly difficult, it's unstable, and it's just prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
So basements, the place where this stuff normally lives, they just don't exist here.
So no basement. What's the next best option?
Well, the system still needs to be inside the home's thermal envelope. That's the insulated part of the house, or at least close to it, so it's efficient and doesn't freeze. The attic, for all its problems, became the default next best spot for builders who wanted that floor space back.
And what I found really interesting in the source material was that this wasn't just some quiet decision. There was a fight about this.
Oh, there was a huge fight. Plumbers, engineers, they saw the risk immediately. They actually tried to push for laws that would force these systems back downstairs into a garage, somewhere a leak is just a puddle on concrete.
Makes sense.
But the lobbying power of the builders, who were focused purely on that sellable square footage, it was just too strong. The profit motive won, and attic water heaters just became the standard for new builds over the last, 30 years or so?
Okay, so the main reason is profit. We get that. But, to be fair, builders have to have some other arguments, some upsides they point to besides just money. What are the supposed benefits?
They do have a few arguments they lean on. And, we should definitely question how much they really benefit you, the homeowner, long-term versus the risk you're taking on. One of the most counterintuitive claims is about energy efficiency, specifically for the electric models.
Wait, hold on. How does putting a hot water tank in an attic that gets up to, 140 degrees in the summer? how does that save energy?
That's the core of their argument. And it really is specific to a climate like Houston's. In the summer, when that attic is already 120, 130 degrees.
Like an oven.
It's an oven. But the electric unit needs less energy to keep the water inside at its target temperature, say 125. The air around it is already so hot, the heating element just doesn't have to work as hard to fight off heat loss.
I mean, okay, I guess that makes a tiny bit of sense for July and August, but is that little bit of savings worth the risk of a flood? And what about, the rest of the year? Or gas heaters?
And that is the exact question that the sources say builders just kind of gloss over. Because in the winter, the complete opposite is true. The attic gets cold, and the tank loses heat much faster than it would in a nice climate-controlled closet. So it has to run more. It's, at best, a seasonal trade-off that looks good on paper for the home's energy rating.
Okay, so the efficiency argument is shaky. What about convenience?
Convenience is a much better argument, I'll give them that, especially if you have a two-story home. Putting the water heater in the attic means the pipes going to the upstairs bathrooms and showers are much, much shorter.
So you get hot water faster.
You get hot water faster, and that's a genuine improvement for you. And then there's the aesthetic convenience. You don't have this big, ugly tank taking up space in your laundry room or your garage.
Out of sight, out of mind. Which I guess leads us right to the biggest problem, right? People forgetting about it. So let's talk about the one thing the building code demands to try and prevent a disaster. This is critical for anyone listening who has one of these.
This is probably the most essential, actionable piece of information. The building code knows this is a huge risk, so it mandates a safety net. Every single attic water heater has to sit inside a drain pan, usually metal or plastic.
Right, a pan to catch the water.
But the pan by itself is basically useless. That pan has to be hooked up to a drain line, a pipe that runs all the way down and terminates somewhere visible on the outside of your house, usually over a window or near your front door.
And why is that specific location, that visible spot, so important?
Because that pipe is your early warning system. It's your emergency signal. If the tank gets a slow pinhole leak, which is how they often start to fail,
A little drip.
the pan catches it, sends down the pipe, and you see water dripping outside your window. That tells you, I have a problem now, before the whole tank lets go and water is pouring through your ceiling.
And that detail is so important. The pan is for slow leaks. It is not designed for when the whole thing blows. And that brings us to the nightmare scenario. Builders got their profit, the code put in a small safety net, but we have to talk about the inevitable.
This is a 100% certainty. Every single tank water heater will fail. It's just a metal tank under pressure, and eventually corrosion wins. The sources say the typical lifespan is somewhere between 8 and 15 years, and the building grade models, you're lucky to get 12.
And when it fails catastrophically, when a seam just gives way, it is not a trickle. We are talking about 50 gallons of water a minute just pouring straight down. Hundreds of gallons total before you can even react.
It is. It's total devastation. The water just pours straight through the drywall, turning it into, soggy cardboard. It soaks all the insulation, which then becomes this giant, heavy, toxic sponge.
And then it just collapses.
Exactly. We've seen examples where the entire ceiling just gives way. It falls into the living room, onto your furniture, your floors, everything.
And the damage doesn't stop when you finally get the water turned off, does it?
No. That's when the second, more expensive problem starts. Once all that drywall and wood framing and insulation is soaked, you've basically built a perfect incubator for mold and mildew. And that's often what really drives up the cost. The source material is clear. The secondary damage from a major mold outbreak requires very expensive professional remediation.
Let's talk numbers, because this is where the risk really hits home for people listening. The financial shock is it's huge.
It is. We have hard figures on this from industry experts in Houston. Repairs from a catastrophic attic water heater leak. They rarely cost less than $10,000, even for a pretty small one.
$10,000 is the starting point.
That's the starting point. And if it happens while you're on vacation for a week, and that water just soaks through multiple rooms, gets into the floors, and you have a major mold problem, those costs can easily soar past $50,000.
$50,000. I mean, that is a life-changing amount of money from a predictable failure of a utility that was put in the worst possible spot just for the builder's profit margin.
And this brings up another reason they fail. Simple neglect. The location itself discourages maintenance. It's out of sight, out of mind. You have to pull down a ladder, crawl through a tight, hot space. I mean, it's 140 degrees up there in the summer.
No one wants to go there.
No one wants to go up there. It makes the work harder. It makes it more expensive to hire a pro. And so people just, they forget about it. They never see the unit, so they don't think about it until it's way, way too late.
That lack of visibility is the real danger. Okay, so let's pivot. Let's talk about what you can do. For anyone listening right now who has one of these, or maybe you're thinking of buying a house that has one, what are the solutions? What are the next steps?
Okay, if you take one thing away from this whole deep dive, let it be this. If your traditional tank water heater is 10 years old or older, you need to get it inspected immediately. Do not wait. You are living on borrowed time with that machine.
So inspection is number one. Beyond that, what are the 3 key things a homeowner can do right now to manage this risk?
First, go confirm that drain pan and the exterior drain line are functional. Seriously, get up there and look. Make sure the pan isn't cracked. Make sure the pipe leading out isn't clogged with, leaves or insulation. And check that it actually drains somewhere visible outside. If it just drains into a wall cavity somewhere, it's useless.
So check the safety net. What's number 2?
Number 2 is an immediate safeguard. Install a smart leak detector. These are really simple, pretty cheap devices. You can get one for under $50. You just place it right in the drain pan. It connects to your Wi-Fi, and the second it senses moisture, it sends a text alert straight to your phone.
Wow.
That alert gives you minutes, maybe even hours, to get home and shut the water off before a tiny leak becomes a $20,000 insurance claim.
That's an incredible return on investment. A $50 device to prevent a $50,000 disaster. Okay, and the third tip. This one's a bigger investment, but it sounds like it might be the only permanent solution.
It is. The third step is to consider a major upgrade to a tankless system. This is the ultimate way to get rid of this specific catastrophic risk.
How does that work?
Well, a tankless unit, it doesn't store any water. It only heats water as you need it, on demand. So you completely eliminate the 50-gallon reservoir that causes the flood in the first place.
So no tank, no flood.
No tank, no flood. Now, the installation can be more complex.
Right.
It often needs a bigger gas line or a major electrical upgrade. But it physically removes that ticking water bomb from above your living space.
And even though the upfront cost is higher, you're looking at several $1,000s for the unit and the installation, you get endless hot water. And they do save energy in the long run. It's really an investment in peace of mind as much as it is in efficiency.
And there's one last little planning note here. The sources highlight that new Department of Energy efficiency rules are coming, probably around 2026. These new rules are going to require much higher efficiency from new water heaters.
Which means?
It means the simple, cheaper models people are used to will likely be phased out. Your replacement options might be more complex, maybe bigger heat pump electric units, or it might push more people toward tankless. The point is, if you know your tank is getting old, planning a replacement before an emergency and before that 2026 deadline could save you a lot of money and hassle.
So let's bring it all together. We started with this weird architectural choice, and what we found is a really clear story. The location of your water heater is the direct result of a building strategy that puts profit from conditioned space above everything else. It's a decision that forces you, the homeowner, to trade a little bit of short-term convenience for this massive long-term financial risk that could cost you upwards of $50,000. But now you know the economics, you understand the real risks, and you have the proactive steps. Check your pan, get a leak detector, and seriously think about going tankless. This is one of those situations where being proactive is worth, well, literally tens of thousands of dollars.
And that leads me to a final sort of provocative thought for you to consider. We've talked about the certainty of failure. We've talked about some potential costs. So given that it's the homeowners insurance companies that end up paying out these $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 claims, should the inspection and replacement of an attic water heater be tied directly to your insurance policy?
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
I mean, should your insurer require proof of an annual inspection? Or maybe an automatic replacement after 12 years just to keep your flood coverage active? It makes you wonder, what other out-of-sight, out-of-mind utilities in your home, your HVAC lines, old valves, or also just ticking time bombs waiting for you to forget about them?
That is a deep dive for another day. Thanks for joining us as we unpack this architectural time bomb. We'll catch you next time.